All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. Thanks everyone watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. I'm Jay Croucher, joined by Drew Dinsick, the Whale Kappa. Today we're going to jump into what happened yesterday. A lot of underdogs winning in the NFL, our adjustments on teams that are trending towards a little bit of disaster, like the Bucs and the 49ers and the Packers. And then we're going to jump into tonight's Monday Night Football matchup and then talk some of Drew's win totals. But firstly, Drew, how are you? Back from Oregon and back into the NFL.
Yeah, it's great to be back. I missed the show last week. Obviously, you did a yeoman's effort keeping up the good fight. Our Friday show that we did, I think we had pretty much a perfect card. Ken's Pats, never in doubt. That over came through, and then our best bets for the weekend, including the Eagles. Very solid show. So good job by us. High five. Less of a good job by the NFL overall at creating an entertaining product. I mean, even the marquee game of the entire regular season, which was Chiefs-Bills, was pretty uneven. But it's still like the NFL has fought for years to get parity, right? And when you look at the NFC in particular right now, and you look at the standings and basically everyone is still live for a playoff spot, it feels more like parity than parity. But that said, the competitive balance is strong. Anyone can win any given Sunday, and I think that was kind of the general vibe of the results as you kind of pick through the box scores, because there was, just like Thursday night, we talked about it, like the box score didn't really jive with the final score. I think you can say that about 8 games yesterday.
Yeah, I think the story of this weekend and really the past couple of weeks has been that the NFC is pretty bad. And we kind of anticipate that a little bit coming into the season, just relative to the AFC, which had, the Bills and the Chiefs are just nailed on as contenders with incredibly high floors. But teams that were among the top 5 favorites in the NFC, the Bucs, the Packers, the Niners, the Rams, have all been underwhelming. And yesterday, 3 of those teams fell off a cliff. The Eagles as well. Like, the Eagles are going to get the 1 seed now because they have the tiebreak over Minnesota, who are the only team really pushing them for that. And so I think that the Eagles are rightfully the favorite in the NFC just because they have the cleanest path to a bye. But I don't know about you, but I wasn't that impressed by the Eagles last night. They got those 3 turnovers off of Cooper Rush and was still against Cooper Rush in Philadelphia. It was still 2017 in the fourth quarter. I think you can run on the Eagles. They revived Ezekiel Elliott. I don't think that the offense is all world to the extent that Buffalo's is, for instance. So I think the NFC is wide open, and which should create the path for a potential long shot. But looking through some of these teams, like, I can't get involved on the Giants at 25-1. Can't get involved on the Saints at 40-1, the Cardinals at 50-1. I mean, and then you're looking at like Falcons, Seahawks. I mean, we love the Seahawks, but can't see them winning 3 games in the playoffs. So are there any long shots that you like in the NFC, or is it just going to be one of these kind of cluster of underwhelming teams that just happens to back itself into 3 wins?
We don't need the Seahawks to win 3 games in the playoffs, Jay. We just need them to win the NFC West. That's going to be a fun. Yeah. That'll be 8 and 9. 8 and 9 winning the NFC West, and the Seahawks have done their job. To go the distance in this playoffs, when it comes to playoff matchups, quarterback is even greater than in a regular season matchup because of the level of play that you get out of quarterbacks is widely varied come playoff time. And so if you can kind of identify like, hey, this team, they at least have an experienced quarterback who's not going to just absolutely ruin the moment for the team. Like, those are the teams that you have to have a little bit more, just a little bit more confidence in that they're going to do something. And I know I'm saying this in the light of a year where Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow had their first ever successful playoff runs. But that's the exception, not the rule. And I think if you kind of look across the contenders, I would be thinking largely about does my team have a quarterback who at least has navigated the very, very rocky waters of the playoffs? And that's still the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers are still not a healthy team. They still have a long way to go to get cohesion on that offensive line, but their defense is still good enough that when we get into the colder months and they become healthier, I think they're still the bet on in the NFC in my mind.
Okay, well, I took the Bucks. I took the look ahead. Bucks minus 6.5 against the Steelers. I got a field goal of value on that, and they still didn't even come close to covering. So, complicated feelings about the Bucks at the moment. I agree that they are probably the best bet on the board, even though it's uninspiring at plus 500, just because they still have a very easy path to the division. Whereas in terms of just team quality and upside, I would look at the Cowboys and the Packers. So I think that, the Cowboys obviously get Dak Prescott back likely this week. And then the Packers, I mean, there's still so much talent on that team, but neither of those teams are going to win the division. Certainly not the Cowboys now that, they're 2 games and the tiebreak back of the Eagles. And then the Packers are also 2 games in the tiebreak back of the Vikings. So you're going to have to look at teams playing on the road.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is it's a frustrating market, because there should be a path for an underdog, but the Eagles are just weighing everything down. They're anchoring the whole market because they have such a clear path to the 1 seed, and they're only plus 210.
Yeah, it's a real shame if the Eagles got the 1 seed. We'd be really sad here, but not exactly at all. But no, I think your perspective that you're coming at this with is completely correct. We should be looking for value right now, but instead I'm looking a little bit more at playing defense in some of the positions that I have that have gotten a huge amount of equity, which is where we're sitting for the most part. But you're right. The path through the NFC goes through Philly, who is the only quarterback of any of those that you would trust on the road in like a kind of a pick'em game. It's Tom Brady. He's literally the only guy that I could see going into that environment and kind of at least keeping his head, keeping his cool, and presumably he has a healthy set of weapons to work with at that time. Because as good as the Eagles are going to be in this regular season and as many wins as they're going to compile, because it's going to be a lot, there are still very clear ways to attack that team, particularly some of the defenses that you pointed out.
Yeah. I'm not writing off the Packers entirely yet. I don't know what the hell's happened to the Packers, not just the past 2 weeks, but really the whole season. But I do think that there's so much talent on that team, and that if they can just somehow upgrade at receiver, be it Odell Beckham, be it Romeo Doubs, just getting a lot better as the season progresses, I do still think that team has upside, but can't touch them at that price when they're going to have to be going on the road, most likely, because of how they've shot themselves in the foot in the division. All right, before we get into tonight's game, remember, please download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. Also available in the App Store is a bad quarterback, Denver Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson, who has a shoulder injury apparently, coincidentally arising after maybe the worst game, or at least the most memeable game of his career against the Colts. But the Broncos playing against the Chargers, the Broncos are plus 4.5. The total is 45.5. What's your lean on this game?
Yeah, I'm looking for an under here. That's too many points for a Broncos game. The idea that the Broncos are going to find success, particularly against the Staley defense, when Staley is kind of the architect of the defense that has basically ruined late stage Russ Wilson's career. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Staley was effectively the architect of the too high when he was on the Rams. And that literally threw ice cold water on a cooking Russ Wilson in his MVP campaign season. And then ultimately, Russell Wilson has never been able to figure out that defense because he doesn't like to throw over the middle of the field, because presumably he can't see over his offensive linemen. And for whatever reason, that problem has been accentuated this year, not solved by the addition of Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett is also bringing nothing to the table in terms of offensive concepts that really make you excited about watching a Broncos game. So I think the fact that that unit is now going up against the Chargers defense that I still have huge regard for, particularly on the secondary side, I think is going to make for an ugly slugfest here for Denver in terms of moving the ball. And then on the flip side, the Chargers still dealing with very meaningful injury to their kind of most important piece in Justin Herbert. They have, they have lost Slater for the season, who was their best tackle, and now they're dealing with injuries to Trey Pipkins III at right tackle. So entirely possible there may be a Storm Norton sighting in this game. There may be a Storm Norton sighting, and even if there's not, you're counting on a 6th round rookie in Jamari Salyer who has played fine,
Good.
in his limited snaps, but now he has to go against Bradley Chubb. That is a really, really tough assignment. And so, the idea that Los Angeles is going to be smooth offensively without Keenan Allen, and with a defense, a running attack that's not going to look nearly as good, considering that they're not going up against the miserable Browns. I think ultimately this is going to be a closely contested 6-7 point win for the Chargers. I would lean Chargers if I had to take a side here, just because I feel like the movement from 6.5 to 4.5 is not really well deserved for what the Broncos have shown you so far this season. But the under, I think, is a better play, just based on both offenses not really giving us much to this point in the season.
Yep. Corey Linsley also questionable, just adding up to the Chargers' absurd annual rush of injuries. I agree with you on the under. That would be my play here too. I think obviously the Denver offense side of the under speaks for itself with how bad they've been. But I do think that the best unit in this game is probably the Denver defense, just with the question marks that the Chargers have offensively, with Herbert dealing with the ribs with their offensive line, and then with Keenan Allen being out. And I do think that as well. I think Pat Surtain is maybe the best cornerback in the NFL right now. And if he's blanketing Mike Williams, then all of a sudden it's Josh Palmer. Like, there's not that much there for the Chargers. It's going to be a lot of Austin Eckler. So I would skew the under. This line it's trending towards 4 at the moment. So there's a lot of belief out there. I presume not in the Denver offense, but rather in the Denver defense, and keeping this close and ugly. And I think if you like the Broncos, if you like the +4.5, if it closes +4, you're probably better off just backing the under, because it's very hard to see them winning a high-scoring matchup. I think the Chargers' defense is, when we spoke about them 2 weeks into the season, when it looked like the Chargers were headed to the Super Bowl, we were talking about the Chargers as a top 5 defense, but now with Joey Bosa out, with JC Jackson is looking bad. I know he's banged up, but I mean, he might not be starting for the Patriots right now, JC Jackson, with how Jonathan and Jack Jones have looked, and Jalen Mills. He genuinely might not be starting. He's been that poor, and he obviously signing the big contract to come to LA. So, yeah, they're a bad vibes team at the moment, the Chargers. But still, Kansas City, second loss. Like, they are, the division is not wide open, but it's more open than it was a couple of weeks ago. So they've got a lot to prove tonight. But in terms of props, one market I would look at is Mike Williams under 70.5 receiving yards. And like, he's easily cleared 100 yards the past 2 weeks, but that's going up against the Texans and Cleveland defenses, which are not great. And now going up against Pat Surtain, who shut down Michael Pittman last week, is playing at an incredibly high level. I do think that Mike Williams is probably just is an underplay until someone is able to beat Pat Surtain. All right. Before we jump into some NBA win totals, if you want more betting, DFS, and fantasy advice right before kickoff tonight, tune into our NFL on NBC Sports YouTube channel at 7 p.m. Eastern as Vaughn Dalzell, Lawrence Jackson, and Kyle Dvoracek answer your questions prior to kickoff between the Broncos and the Chargers. All right, Drew. Missed you last week. Brad filled in ably and gave out some of his bets. We missed yours, though, for the NBA. So tell me what your favorite overs are for win totals.
Ooh, this is an easy one to start with. Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm exposed a dozen different ways to these guys being good as a regular season team, especially. I just feel like the roster composition and the synergy that you have now with putting Rudy Gobert next to Towns, and the emergence of Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell now having a big that he can go pick and roll with. Like, all of it is just absolute music to my ears. My only concern was depth and injury potential, and all they have proven in the preseason is that they're a lot deeper than I thought. So now, like, my already warm feelings about the Timberwolves have crept even warmer. I think that is your easiest look for kind of a real high payout, like upside position. The Timberwolves are in the West. The West has 4 of the 5 worst teams in the NBA, 4 teams who are clearly tanking for the 1 seed. And so the West should have more bifurcation in terms of the high wins and the low and the significant losses. And then they're in the division with 2 of those 4 teams. So I think that, realistically, wins against the Jazz and the Thunder should come, at a relatively strong clip. A lot of people excited about that Denver Nuggets team that is going to be missing that's going to be reintegrating Michael Porter Jr. Who knows if he gives you a full season? He's a huge piece to them ultimately, reaching their potential this season. And so I see a lot of questions in division, and I see a lot of potential Western Conference wins for this Jazz team on top of, for this Thunder, the Timberwolves team, excuse me, the Rudy Gobert addition, slip of the tongue there. But well coached, well rostered, lots of different, versatility, different looks they can give you. I like them for most wins in the NBA. And I think they could threaten kind of high 60s if things go well. They're 20-1 to have the most wins in the NBA. And I think that's an absolutely absurd price. Schedule's soft to start out. So they have that kind of the same breaks that the Suns had last year, where they could really get a little bit of momentum going into the holiday season. This Timberwolves team is going to be a truck, and I don't want to be in the way of that. So a lot of Timberwolves overs for me.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. That was my best bet in the Western Conference, the over there. I think with regular season, when you're talking about teams that are in the contender or fringe contender sphere, racking up wins, it's all about system and incentives. Rudy Gobert is a defensive system unto himself, and then Edwards and Towns give you such a high floor offensively. And then incentives-wise, people are going to lose their jobs in Minnesota if this team doesn't get, 50 wins and is at least threatening for home court in the West, which I think they'll get. So all in Timberwolves. I've already made a big batch of merch order of Wolves gear because I'm all in Rudy Gobert. We're looking forward to seeing La Défense in Minnesota this regular season. I think they're going to have a top 5 defense and a top 10 offense, and you mix those two together, you're looking at mid-50s wins with, I agree, some scope for more. All right, what's your next favorite over?
Yes, my other 3 looks for overs, all in the Eastern Conference, which maybe doesn't make sense because I just went on and on about how there was all these tanking teams in the West. But the Eastern Conference is going to be extremely competitive, top to bottom. There are very, very good teams in this conference, and I think you have to look at the 76ers right now, who are being rated as about the third or fourth, depending on what market you're checking. And I make them the best in terms of just personnel who are going to be on the court for the regular season, game by game type of matchups. I think the Sixers are alive to win the Atlantic. I think the Sixers are probably your in my mind, at least by my model, I'm looking at the presumptive 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And I think their over is a fair look at 51.5. And then I'm going to go to the bottom of the Eastern Conference and take a little bit of, just buy a little stock in the Magic, buy a little stock in the Pistons. Just, 2 teams that have your number 1 overall pick from last year and the previous season. Young stars and good nucleus around those teams. A decent amount of investment this offseason just to get personnel, and just kind of make the team deeper. And I think that all makes sense. If you have had the number 1 pick the last couple of years, you need to start showing progress. You need to start showing results. And I don't think those 2 teams are primed for tanking whatsoever. And so they're going to scoop some wins against the tanking teams. Their totals are extremely low because they are expected to be among the worst teams in the NBA. And I think that they do show potential to leap. So for me, a little bit, a high potential ceiling for the Sixers, and a decent chance that the Magic and the Pistons exceed expectations.
Yep, I'm with you on the Sixers in particular. I think it's completely insane that the market has the Nets a shorter favorite than the Sixers to win the Atlantic Division. Have the Sixers clearly above Brooklyn. And I think that just with their depth, with the incentives as well there, with James Harden's first season, and Tobias Harris is their 4th option, which puts you in a really good spot. So I think that the Sixers are going to be a regular season machine. I've taken some Magic plus 1,500 to make the play-in. That's dropped now, but I just
that's
think
a fun one.
Yeah, get the 10 seed. That's doable. You're going to be beating out teams like Charlotte, and the Bulls have a lot of downside. I don't think people realize how good Franz Wagner is. He's really good. Paolo, I think, will be good from the jump. And then in guys like Suggs, Fultz, they have upside. Wendell Carter's really solid. I just wish that Fultz and Gary Harris were a bit healthier, but I think Fultz in particular should be fine. Pistons, I was with you initially, but just seeing them in the preseason, not sure Cade is ready for this in terms of leading a team to low 30s by himself at this point. But also, I think that Jaden Ivey is just going to be bad to start. I think he'll be good eventually, but I don't think he's going to contribute to winning basketball. But trading for Bojan definitely helps them. All right, let's jump into some unders. What's your favorite under on the board?
Ooh, favorite on the board. God, this is tough. I'm with you on Washington and Charlotte as unders and potential secret tankers. Especially with Charlotte now missing huge chunks of the early part of the season with LaMelo Ball. Like, the talent on that roster is really, really, really suspect. I have them talent-wise rated below the Magic, and that's a problem. And considering LaMelo, not on the floor for them, they didn't really address. I didn't think their biggest issues and concerns with the replacing the head coach and or kind of addressing the big situation. So as suspect a defense that exists in the NBA. And similarly, Washington, I think, they're getting this sort of, both teams are kind of rated in that middle class of a very, very tough Eastern Conference. I just don't see them getting the wins that they're going to need among the upper crust of the East to get to those win totals. So I like under in both the Hornets and the Wizards. And I took an undershot on the Memphis Grizzlies in the same sense of, if you're going to downgrade a team for the loss of a key defensive piece like the market has for the Boston Celtics, which I agree with, then you better do it for the Grizzlies, because Jared Jackson Jr. is their entire defensive system, really. And now you have a couple of young players in Bane and Ja Morant, who took huge leaps forward last season. Is that sustainable? Will there be some regression to the mean? Are the Memphis Grizzlies more like the 6th or 7th best team in the West? That's where I rank them. And so the idea of getting them kind of, under 50 wins to me seems like a decent shot. And, it's not a super strong case, but something's got to give at the top of the West. And I think it's going to be Memphis.
Yep. I think also just losing DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson, who are kind of significant pieces to that team, certainly in the regular season, that's going to hurt. I think the Hornets, the thing is with how good the top 2 picks are going to be this year in the draft, that, if you're tracking towards 36 wins, then you want to pull the plug and finish at 28 wins. And so I think there's going to be huge downward gravity there with those types of teams. With the Wizards, I do think that they're going to try and get wins because of the organizational incentives, because they re-signed Beal, because they've made all these margins to win now. And by winning now, I mean get the 9 seed. So I do think the Wizards are going to be trying. It's just a matter of Kristaps and Beal staying healthy. If those two stay healthy all season, then I think they are a 37, 38 win team, but they tend not to stay healthy. And then, I think that it's a good look to look at teams in that low 30s win range and take the under on them just because of the momentum. So I'm with you there.
I saved my hottest take for last, because this is this is against all of the smart basketball podcasting bros who love the Toronto Raptors this year. I loved the Toronto Raptors last year because the market was super cold on them. Their win total was in the 30s, Jay. It was in the 30s.
I bet it over. Yeah, I took an out win over. It was great win.
It was great. This year, it's not in the 30s. It's way, way higher. And everybody's like, oh, I love this Toronto team. They're in the toughest division in all of basketball by a mile. Like, they might be the worst team in that division, depending on how things go with the Knicks in terms of their team chemistry and the additions that they made fitting. Really and truly, the bump that they had last year for teams not taking players to Canada because of the vaccination status. Do people not remember this? They've forgotten this already, that was a huge part of some of the wins that they got that were low hanging fruit. I don't see anywhere close to the same optimism for this Toronto team that I did last year, considering where the market had them rated. They were 200-1 to win the Atlantic last year. Like that's a buy price, not this. And so, I think this Toronto team just broadly overrated. People are going gaga over the fact that, they're using bigs as point guards and blah, blah, blah. If you're using bigs as point guards, that means you don't have a point guard. Like, that's really more of the story to me. So I'm not feeling the Raptors this season. It's going to be a bet against team for me, particularly early part of the season.
Wow. Drew Dinsick hates Canada. All right. No, I do think I'm with you, like, big picture. I'm probably lower than market on the Raptors, just because I don't really see their path to doing anything in terms of, getting to an Eastern Conference Finals, unless, like, Scotty Barnes has to become a top 10 player in the league. And that's not going to happen this year, clearly. And then their depth is always suspect. there's always so much Delano Banton and these kind of guys, Steve McCalloch, like they were just getting run. I do think, though, that just regular season-wise, Nick Nurse, these young guys now, it's a second year in that defensive system. I do think they're going to be a nightmare to play against just night to night in the regular season because of their length, their energy, just the overall talent level. But it is still a problem that they don't really have anyone who can shoot, dribble, like get to the rim, do everything. Everyone has a very definable weakness. Siakam can't really shoot. Van Vliet doesn't really get to the rim. OG can't really do anything offensively outside of kind of take open threes and charge to the rim. And then Scotty Barnes is still relatively unrefined as an offensive player in terms of a guy who's going to be a star. So I'm with you. It's a big jump in win total year to year. I think they'll be right around this mark. But yeah, I would skew probably more pessimistic about the Raptors than most. All right, we're done, Drew. Now, a reminder for everyone, tomorrow we have a special Bet the Edge episode dedicated to NBA awards and other futures. I'll say for myself, if you're going to listen to one episode all year, I'd listen to one. This is my wheelhouse. This is my baby, is NBA awards. Last year, we talked about it on the show. We got Marcus Smart, 200-1, Defensive Player of the Year. Tyler Hero, 30-1, Sixth Man of the Year. Ja Morant, 30-1, Most Improved Player. So I do think this is a very, very vulnerable market. I've already gotten all my bets in, so I'll speak very freely about what I think is value. I won't be hiding anything. So please tune into that before the season begins. Now, don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com as well for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on our NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to subscribe and rate us. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll be back tomorrow.